In the waning days of the 16th century, the Korean peninsula was the stage for one of East Asia's most devastating conflicts, the Imjin War. This brutal 6-year struggle pitted Japan against the allied forces of Korea and Ming China, culminating in the Battle of Noryang Point, fought in December 1598. This battle was the war's last major naval engagement and marked the heroic final act of Admiral Yi Sun-sin, one of history's greatest naval commanders. Following centuries of internal warfare, Japan was finally unified by 1590 under Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a man whose ambitions reached far beyond his island realm. For he had set his eyes on continental Asia, envisioning a military campaign that would ultimately invade Ming China, one of the world's largest empires. Korea, known as Joseon at the time, stood directly in the path of this grand design, as Hideyoshi viewed the peninsula merely as a bridge to the Asian mainland. Thus, his forces invaded in April of 1592 with a massive army, intending to cross that bridge swiftly, believing they would easily push the locals aside. And initially, they did just that, as the Japanese troops, highly disciplined and battle-tested, succeeded with remarkable speed to overwhelm the Korean defenders. Each time the Koreans attempted to hold the line, they were outmatched by their foes, resulting in the capital Hangsong, modern-day Seoul, to fall in less than a month, forcing the Korean court to retreat northward and to petition the Ming Chinese emperor for aid in their desperate struggle of survival. Although the Japanese forces dominated on land, control of the sea proved elusive. Korea's navy, led by Admiral Yi Sun-sin, played a decisive role in halting the Japanese advance. Yi was a career military officer whose strategic insight and innovations changed the nature of naval warfare in the region. One of his key innovations was the Bokson, known to us in the West as the turtle ship, an armored vessel covered in iron spikes to repel boarding and equipped with multiple cannon ports. Yi's fleet disrupted Japanese logistical lines along the coast, crippling the invasion's sustainability. Between 1592 and 97, Yi fought 23 battles, never suffering a single defeat, which allowed the Ming Chinese forces to join the war effort and stabilize the Korean defenses, as well as pushing the Japanese back in key locations. Yi's leadership culminated in his magnum opus at the Battle of Noryang in October, where 13 Korean ships held off a vastly larger Japanese fleet, sinking much of it in the process, thanks to the turtle ships as well as masterful Korean seamanship and immense bravery. By late 1598, Toyotomi Hideyoshi died shortly after expressing his wish that the Japanese retreat from the incredibly costly war in Korea. And the new Japanese leadership that succeeded him agreed to see it done and withdraw their forces from the peninsula. However, the evacuation would require safe passage by sea through the narrow straits of Noryang, at Korea's southern coast, where the Japanese forces had been boxed in at Suncheon by the now recovered Korean army supported by the Ming forces. Not wanting to let the cruelty that the Japanese soldiers inflicted upon their land and their people go unpunished, the combined Korean-Ming fleet under Admiral Yi and Ming commander Chen Lin laid an ambush for the evacuation fleet on December 16, 1598, under the cover of darkness in Noryang Bay.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
The sources differ about what happened next, as some of them claim that the Ming struck the vanguard of the Japanese fleet acting as the anvil. Yi struck hard from around the northern flank and hammered the enemy fleet, whilst other sources do claim that it was Yi who struck the vanguard and the Ming doing the flanking. Either way, the result was the same. The narrow waters of Noryang turned chaotic. Cannon fire erupted from both sides. Ships burned and desperate soldiers scrambled amongst the smoke and the heat.
발사하라! 발사하라!
Despite intense fighting, the Japanese fleet was unable to break the encirclement. From his flagship in the thick of the fighting, Admiral Yi coordinated maneuvers among the storm of the battle. Tragically, he was hit by a musket shot, suffering a fatal wound. Knowing the impact this would have on his men, Yi instructed that the news of his death be kept secret until the battle concluded. When it eventually did, it was a decisive victory for the Korean-Ming alliance, and the Japanese fleet was left shattered, with what remained of their forces evacuating under the cover of darkness, marking the effective end of the Japanese ambitions in Korea. For now. The Battle of Noryang sealed the end of the Imjin War. Korea, though devastated and ransacked by years of war, famine and fire, endured the storm with its identity intact. From the ashes of its ruined cities and broken countryside, it began the long and painful task of rebuilding, a testament to the resilience of its people and the enduring legacy of those who fought to defend it. For the Ming Chinese, the Imjin War posed significant strain on their treasury, manpower and political stability. Though not the sole cause, it contributed to the weakening of the empire, a process that, combined with corruption, famine and the Manchu, would culminate in the fall of the Ming in the following century. The Japanese, with their fleet destroyed and forces withdrawn, abandoned plans for conquest and looked inward instead, entering a period of consolidation under the Tokugawa shogunate, ending its era of military adventures for over 2 centuries. As for our admiral, with his final battle won and the enemy driven from Korean shores, he stood immortalized, not just by triumph, but by his ultimate sacrifice. An enduring symbol of Korean patriotism, leadership and naval genius, his unbroken record of victories and unwavering resolve in the face of overwhelming odds forged a legend that transcends time. As we all know by now, many of the game's historical scenarios tend to take creative liberties in their portrayal of the real-world events. and the scenario of the Battle of Noryang is one of the more egregious examples. So much so that the problems begin even before you actually start the mission. The map used here gives the implication that the Ming reinforcements arrived by sea to aid their Korean allies, but they actually came down on foot from the north, and only the naval contingent came by sea, of course. Secondly, and more importantly, it completely omits the fact that the Japanese punched as far north as Pyongyang in the first phase of the war, whereas the narrator speaks as though the Koreans had managed to hold the Japanese and kept them penned close by the sea. The other major inaccuracy of this scenario is the whole premise of the mission, as the way it plays out is as though you are in command of Korea and the Japanese are attempting to defeat your navy and get their men ashore. I am not going to go into the actual tactics of the battle, of course, because of the manner in which our beloved game is made. However, what is important to note is that the Koreans did not take the fight to Japan, as you are told to do in this scenario. The horrible and frankly inexcusable inaccuracies don't end there, I'm afraid. As in the outro cutscene, the first sentence once again completely ignores the fact that the Japanese had conquered and occupied much of the Korean peninsula for the past few years. Although, to be fair, Yi Sun-sin's harassment of the Japanese supply lines did prove crucial to the Koreans' ability to push the Japanese back south. Furthermore, the narrator also states that Hideyoshi died soon after the battle, when in fact he had died about 3 months beforehand.
Why?
I sincerely hope that you have enjoyed this video about the real-life story behind the historical scenario Noryang Point. If you did, please consider commenting, sharing, liking and subscribing. It helps immensely. Up next on this channel, I am working on the first release of the Wonders of AoE2 for 2025 series, so make sure you hit that notification button to get notified when that one comes out. But goodbye for now, and thank you for watching.